The US Ascendant dropped out of FTL travel into the dead silence of the Tharos system, a place no one had ever charted. Captain Avon Drake stood at the observation window of the command deck, staring out at the endless black. His fingers drummed lightly against the cold, polished surface of his console, his mind racing. The signal they had intercepted was unlike anything they had encountered before, ancient, powerful, and brimming with an unsettling sense of urgency. "We're in range of the source," Lieutenant Marla Pierce reported from the sensor station, her voice steady but tinged with concern. Her fingers flew across the console as she worked to triangulate the signal's origin. "It's coming from that uncharted planet, Terak 7. Drake nodded, eyes narrowing. "Set course. All hands. Brace for possible contact." As the ship adjusted its course toward the planet, the crew's unease grew palpable. The message they decoded had been fragmented, but the core of it was clear: the Krall are coming. The Krall were not a name spoken lightly. Their empire stretched across the galaxy, a brutal regime that had annihilated entire species and enslaved those they deemed worthy. Their reputation alone had caused whole civilizations to quiver in fear. And now the signal suggested that they were on the move again, and for some reason, humanity was their target. "Captain." Maya Holt, the Ascendant's communications officer, called from her station. "I'm picking up something distant, but it's definitely Krall encrypted transmissions. They're already here. We've got company." Drake's jaw clenched. The Krall had been silent for over a century, their empire thought to be in decline. But now, with no warning, they were back, and they had already set their sights on humanity. "All hands, prepare for battle," Drake ordered, his voice cold but resolute. "We're not going down without a fight." He turned to his crew. They weren't just going to survive this. They were going to show the Krall exactly who they were dealing with. The Krall's flagship, the Korath Prime, loomed in the distance like a giant, silent predator circling its prey. The crew of the US Ascendant watched it from their command deck, each member feeling the weight of what was coming. The Krall didn't just fight, they relished it. They revelled in brutality, seeing strength as the only true currency in the galaxy. But the humans were different. They didn't just survive, they fought with heart, with cleverness, and with a fierce will that could not be broken. Captain Avon Drake stood at the head of his crew, eyes fixed on the holographic display of the Krall ship. His jaw tightened. "They've called for a trial of combat," he said grimly. "They want us to send our champions, our best fighters, one-on-one." Sergeant Relly Stone, a battle-hardened former MMA champion and one of Earth's top Special Forces operatives, stepped forward, her posture resolute. She was already dressed for battle, her body sculpted with muscle and hardened by years of brutal combat. "I'll do it, Captain," she said, her voice steady, the faintest trace of a smile on her lips. "Let's show them what a human champion looks like." Drake gave her a nod of approval. There was no hesitation in her. Riley had fought in some of the deadliest arenas in the world, but this was different. This wasn't just a fight for money or glory. This was for the survival of the human race. The Krall leader, a towering alien called Korath, was their greatest warrior, enhanced by genetic modifications that made him a beast on the battlefield. Riley was a fraction of his size, but where Korath relied on sheer power, Riley had speed, agility, and the sharpest tactical mind in the fleet. As the battle began on the Krall's designated arena, an airless, gravity-defying platform in the belly of their flagship, Riley faced Korath, who roared in challenge. The crowd of Krall soldiers, their eyes glowing with an alien hunger, screamed for blood. The fight was brutal. Korath came at Riley like a wrecking ball, every strike like thunder. But Riley danced around him, every movement precise and calculated. She waited for the right moment. Then, with one explosive move, she disarmed the Krall champion, using his momentum against him, and sent him crashing to the ground. The Krall were stunned into silence. Riley stood tall over Korath, breathing hard but unbroken. Her victory sent a shockwave through the Krall ranks. For the first time in centuries, the Krall had been defeated in combat by a human, and that was just the beginning. The victory in the arena was a bittersweet one. While the humans had gained a momentary reprieve and the grudging respect of the Krall, it quickly became clear that this was merely the calm before the storm. The Krall were not the type to let a single defeat stop them. They were already planning their next move, one far more deadly than a gladiatorial contest. The message was clear. The Krall weren't just here to fight. They were here to conquer. And to do so, they had a secret weapon. It was Maya Holt, the Ascendant's communications officer, who first detected the anomaly. Hours after Riley's victory, she'd have been working around the clock to monitor Krall transmissions, trying to gain any intelligence that could give them an edge. At first, it was just random data, a stream of encrypted chatter and garbled code. But then, through a painstaking effort, she isolated a pattern. "Captain," Maya called out, her voice sharp with urgency. "I think I found something. The Krall are deploying a new type of weapon, some kind of cloaked fleet. It's not just stealth. They are using a form of quantum distortion to hide their ships from every scanner we have." Drake turned to her, his face hardening. "Can we trace it?" Maya's fingers flew over her console as she worked, her eyes narrowing in concentration. "Not unless we can get close enough to their ships. They're using tech beyond anything we've seen before. But there is a chance. If we can get within range of their flagship, Korath Prime, I might be able to track the signature back to the source." Drake took a deep breath. This was dangerous, even by human standards. The Krall fleet was formidable, but now they were facing an enemy that could strike without warning. They couldn't afford to wait until the Krall chose to attack. They had to act first. "Set a course," Drake ordered, his voice steely. "We're going to hunt them down." The Ascendant's engines roared to life as the crew braced for a stealth operation that could very well be their last. If they failed, the Krall's hidden fleet would be upon Earth before anyone knew what hit them. The hunt was on. The US Ascendant surged through the dark reaches of space, its course set toward the Krall flagship, Korath Prime. Captain Evan Drake stood at the helm, his hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the vastness of space. The tension aboard the ship was palpable. They had just made the jump to the Starfall Nebula, a dense, volatile region of space that would shield them from Krall scanners. But it wasn't the nebula itself that made Drake uneasy. It was the unsettling feeling gnawing at him, the feeling that something was wrong. The plan was simple. Maya Holt had cracked the Krall's cloaking technology, and now they were headed straight for the heart of their hidden fleet. The Ascendant would get in close, and Maya would use a tactical device she'd rigged to trace the Krall's cloaked ships. Once they had their coordinates, the team would make a swift strike and dismantle the fleet before it could launch a full-scale assault on Earth. But as the nebula loomed ever closer, a sudden cold silence fell over the crew. The ship shuddered violently. "Report." Drake snapped. "We've been hit, directly in the power core." Lieutenant Pierce shouted from the sensor station. "Captain, something's wrong." "The power surge. It's coming from inside the ship." Drake's eyes widened as the realization hit him. It's sabotage. Before he could give another order, alarms blared across the bridge. The ship's systems began to fail, and then came the worst news of all. Someone had triggered the Ascendant's self-destruct sequence. Maya's voice rang out over the intercom. "Captain, it's Admiral Bradstone. He's behind it. I've intercepted comms. He's working with the Crawl." The betrayal hit like a sucker punch. Bradstone, the very admiral they had trusted to defend Earth's interests, had turned against them. The crew stared in disbelief, but there was no time for shock. "Seal all bulkheads and lock down the bridge," Drake ordered, his voice steady but cold. "Maya, get to the control room. Riley with me. We're stopping this before it's too late." The crew sprang into action, scrambling through the corridors as the ship's systems began to fail. If they didn't stop Bradstone, the Ascendant would be nothing more than a tomb for its crew. And worse, Bradstone's deal with the Crawl meant the lives of every human colony were at stake. The clock was ticking. The traitor had to be stopped. The corridors of the US Ascendant felt like a maze as Captain Drake and Sergeant Riley Stone raced toward the ship's command center. Behind them, the ship groaned under the strain of failing systems, its power flickering as the self-destruct countdown continued to tick down. Bradstone had sabotaged the core, set a course for deep space, and locked down critical sections of the ship, all to ensure the Crawl had full access to Earth's defenses. But Drake wasn't about to let it end like this. "Bradstone is going to pay for this," Riley muttered under her breath, her combat boots pounding the steel floor as she kept pace with Drake. Her eyes burned with the fire of someone who'd been betrayed by the very people they swore to protect. Maya Holt's voice crackled through their comms. "Captain, I've isolated Bradstone's location. He's on the upper deck, in the central control room. But we're not alone. He's got Crawl agents with him. At least a dozen." Drake's jaw clenched, but he didn't flinch. He could hear the urgency in Maya's voice, and it only steeled his resolve. If Bradstone thought he could hand Earth over to the Crawl and walk away, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. "Sergeant Stone," Drake said, his voice steady. "Take point. We're going in hot." Riley didn't need any further instructions. She had lived for moments like this, pushing through the chaos, fighting to protect the people she cared about. The traitor would face the consequences of his actions, and really wasn't about to let anyone, Crawl or human, stand in her way. They reached the control room door just as the countdown reached a minute. "Ready, Captain?" Riley asked, her voice cool, though her hand gripped the pulse rifle like a vice. "Always," Drake replied, pushing the door open. The control room was a battlefield in itself. Bradstone stood at the center, flanked by 2 Crawl agents, a smug smile playing across his face. But that smile faltered as he saw Riley and Drake burst into the room. "You think you can stop me?" Bradstone sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "You're too late." Riley's response was immediate, a flash of motion, a shot, and the Crawl agents crumpled to the ground. "We'll see about that," Drake said, his hand steady on his blaster. The final confrontation was about to begin. The US Ascendant dropped out of warp, emerging from the void like a ghost into the heart of Crawl space. Captain Drake stood at the helm, his eyes locked on the vast, hostile expanse of Crawl Prime, the homeworld of the Crawl Empire, now a bastion of darkness and bloodshed. The system was swarming with Crawl warships, their imposing silhouettes cutting across the stars like harbingers of doom. Earth's forces had been fighting on the defensive for weeks now, but this was it, the final gambit. If they failed here, humanity would be crushed under the Crawl's heel. "All ships in position, Captain," Lieutenant Marla Pierce reported from the tactical station. We've got the fleet aligned and ready to strike. Our allies are in position too. Drake nodded grimly. The Krall had underestimated humanity's resilience, and they had underestimated the strength of the alliances Earth had forged with the civilizations they had once considered enemies. The shadow of the Krall's past tyranny had sparked a fire among the galaxy's oppressed species, and now at last, that fire was about to consume the empire that had once enslaved them all. "Good," Drake said, looking out over the massive battlefield. "This is where it ends." Sergeant Riley Stone stood at the ready beside him, her face grim but resolute. "How do you want to play this, Captain?" Drake's eyes flicked to the main display, where the Krall's flagship Korath Prime loomed, its surface bristling with weapons and shields. "We're going after the heart of the beast," he said. "I'm taking the Ascendant in. You're with me, Riley. We'll hit their command center and disable their leadership. Everyone else, hold the line. Keep the Krall distracted long enough for us to break through." As the battle unfolded in real time, the Ascendant and its allies tore through the Krall fleet with an intensity that was both beautiful and terrifying. Missiles streaked through space, ships exploded in brilliant bursts of light, and every moment was a razor's edge. But Drake's eyes were fixed on the prize. Korath Prime was vulnerable now, its shields were down, its command deck in chaos, and this was humanity's chance to strike back. "Prepare for boarding action," Drake ordered, his voice cold and determined. "We're taking Krall Prime, one way or another." The Ascendant ploughed through the heart of the Krall fleet, breaking through their defences like a hammer through glass. It was a battle that would go down in history, a battle that would define the future of the galaxy. And humanity, against all odds, would be the one to shape that future. The final push had been relentless. The Ascendant tore through the wreckage of Krall warships, its hull scarred by debris and enemy fire, but undeterred. Inside the command deck, the crew worked with surgical precision, their focus unwavering even as the battle raged around them. Captain Drake stood at the helm, his hands steady on the controls as the ship closed in on Krall Prime. The massive planet loomed in the distance, its surface blackened and scarred by centuries of warfare. Every inch of the Krall homeworld was fortified, its atmosphere buzzing with the hum of weapons systems and defense grids. But what was most terrifying wasn't the scale of Krall Prime's defenses, it was the truth that was about to be uncovered. "Captain, we're approaching their central command center," Maya Holt reported, her voice tight with urgency. "I'm hacking into their systems now. This could be the key to taking down their empire once and for all." Drake nodded, his mind racing. The Ascendant had breached the outer defenses, and now they were in the heart of the Krall Empire. But it wasn't just Krall Prime they were after. It was the truth. An ancient human artifact had been discovered on the planet Meredith, a relic left behind by a long-forgotten civilization, a weapon that could unravel the very foundation of Krall power. But it was more than just a weapon. It was the key to unlocking a long-hidden secret. As Maya continued her work, Riley Stone stood at the ready, her pulse rifle in hand. The final breach was coming, and with it, a confrontation that would shape the future of humanity and the galaxy. "Captain," Maya's voice rang out, a note of disbelief in her words. "You need to hear this." Drake turned, his face hardening as Maya's screen flickered. What he saw next shook him to his core. The Krall were not just invaders, they were slaves. Slaves to a race even older, even more powerful than them. The Axharkar. The Krall, Drake realized, were never the true masters. They were the enforcers of a far darker force. The Asterisk Tarkar Asterisk were coming, and humanity's fight for survival had just begun. The revelation sent a shiver through the crew of the US Ascendant. The Crawl, the galaxy's most feared conquerors, were nothing more than tools, slaves to an ancient race known as the Arcar. This hidden truth, uncovered deep within Crawl Prime's central archives, shattered everything they had believed about their enemy. The Arcar were an unstoppable force, a civilization so advanced that even the Crawl, with all their genetic modifications and brutality, had been nothing but pawns in their game. And now, with the Crawl reawakened, the Arcar were coming for humanity. "We don't have much time," Maya Holt said, her voice taut with urgency. "The Arcar are preparing to make their move. If we don't act now, we could be facing an enemy the likes of which we've never imagined." Drake's heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't hesitate. There was no room for doubt now. They had come too far, and humanity's survival depended on them putting everything on the line. "Riley, gather the team," Drake said, his voice cutting through the tension. "We're going to hit them before they can strike. This is our moment. We'll take the fight to the Arcar, and we'll show them what humanity is made of." The battle was already underway. The Crawl had begun to scramble, desperately trying to re-establish control of their planet's core systems. But as Drake's team stormed the central command center, they encountered no mere Krell soldiers. The Arcar were there, towering figures of near unbeatable strength, armed with weapons of pure energy that disintegrated anything they touched. They were everywhere, moving like shadows, their eyes glowing with a cold intelligence that spoke of millennia of conquest. Yet the humans fought on. Against overwhelming odds, against enemies they barely understood, they stood together, unyielding, resolute. Captain Drake and his team fought with everything they had. They knew the truth now. Humanity wasn't just a survivor in the galaxy. They were the future. Every human on that battlefield embodied something that the Arcar could never comprehend. A will to survive, a capacity for change, and a relentless drive to push forward no matter the cost. The battle raged on, but humanity had found its purpose. The Arcar might have been the true masters of the galaxy, but they would soon learn one undeniable truth: humanity does not kneel. And in the end, humanity would be the ones to shape the future of the stars.